Recently, I was able to talk with blogger, busy professional woman, and adoptive parent, Adoptive Black Mom. ABM was busy building a successful life for herself when she made the decision to become a mother by adoption. Once she dove into that process, she realized that she didn't hear her own voice represented. The blog that she started to talk about her journey of adopting and raising her daughter started to grow an audience of people who, like her, wanted a place where they could explore the Black adoptive experience. Find out more about ABM's adoption and blog, this time on Adoption Uncovered.
I guess when I was pretty young, I always thought that adoption would probably be a part of my future family story. But I thought that it would be not the exclusive way that I would create a family. I thought that it would be additive. I thought, I'd have a very kind of traditional, I'd get married and have biological children. And, when the air quote time is right, because that doesn't really exist, I realize in retrospect, but when the time was right, I would, hopefully my partner and I would explore adoption. And I always was very interested in older child adoption from foster care. I never particularly had an interest in infant adoption. That just wasn't anything that really about it that spoke to me. I really am a firm believer in family preservation whenever possible. And for me, anyway, the idea of infant adoption just didn't fit into my story. So fast forward, I built a career, I never got married. And then as I was sliding towards my 40s, I started kind of really giving a lot of thought to creating a family independent of a relationship. And then I had a pretty significant health episode that left me infertile. And when I sought treatment for it, it wasn't, fertility wasn't even a part of the discussion and how to maintain fertility. It just wasn't a part of the conversation at all. So it was pretty shocking that then that option with what few years I thought I had left with fertility, that option was just off the table. And I guess the upside of it was, one, I was already getting to a place of trying to decide what I wanted to do in terms of creating a family. And two, then I didn't have this particular option of giving birth, which frankly wasn't, the loss of it grieved me more than actually my desire to ever truly have biological kids. It was just kind of one of those things that you were supposed to do as a woman. And so when it was off the table, I kind of grieved it more because I felt like it was more of a body betrayal more than anything else. And here's the one thing that, women are supposed to do. And then I couldn't do it. And so I did struggle a bit with that, but it did also create an opportunity for me to say, this adoption path was always kind of a part of my longtime vision board. So let's pivot. And I started the process, and I looked at different agencies and groups, and decided I found one that really specialized in older child adoption and had a program for that. And so I proceeded from there. Yeah, that's kind of how I kind of got launched into to this.
Right. And so how did that process go for you? Was there anything that stood out that kind of surprised you, or was it pretty smooth?
I had a very absurdly smooth process. From start to finish, it between, I guess the day I dropped off my paperwork to the mail to actually work with the agency I chose till Hope was in my home. It was, January 7th, I dropped off that envelope, with the initial deposit to work with the agency. And the following year, January 22nd, she moved in.
Right from the start, ABM found that her adoption training felt like a very white space where she and her life experience weren't represented.
Yes, like, and I'm like, anybody that thinks that you can prepare for parenting with, like, I don't know, a 6 to 9 week, like, all day, whatever, it's absurd, right? But I know that's kind of what we all have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But when we got to the training about transracial adoption, the assumption in all of the materials was that children of color were going to be with white families. And I was like, oh, is that what we're doing? Because that's not, well, suppose the child that I get matched with is white or white passing, like, then what? Like, there's clearly no resources. And there wasn't any, like, there was just, so there was that piece that Black parents are not a part of an adoption story at all. Like, we just weren't there. Clearly, this was a white space, white training, and also, I mean, I am straight, but there were same-sex couples in the class that I was taking. And so there were all of these very latent assumptions about white, cis, gendered, straight, probably Christian, kind of archetype in terms of who gets to be an adoptive parent. And I didn't see myself in any of that. And, I love the agency that I worked with. They were wonderful. And one of the reasons that I worked with them was that the person that headed up the program that I was in was African American. And that was and really, really important to me, because I needed to feel like somebody understood my journey and my story, and those kinds of things. But adoption, generally speaking, writ large, is a very white space. The trainings, the people who get invited to talk, the people who do the training, the people who are becoming parents, the people who, and it's a very white space. And sometimes it was uncomfortable. And, one of the reasons why, I started the blog originally to kind of keep people up to date, and why I kept writing the blog was because there's so few parents of color in the adoption space that write and consistently write for long periods of time. Usually they kind of sputter out. And so I really did not intend to write this long. But again, there's just so few spaces out there that you just don't see yourselves. And it can be very isolating to go to trainings or to go to a support group. And, so many of us adoptive parents may have kids who struggle with behavioral issues, some mental health issues, all kinds of things. And the realities of law enforcement engagement are very, very different for families of color. And I do know that some of my friends who are transracial adoptive parents have recognized that their engagement with law enforcement with respect to their children is different, but they had to learn that. I've always known that.
Right.
And to actually then be looking for support, but then having to sometimes coddle people who don't understand this experience and just how dangerous it can be here for people of color, I didn't get the support I needed.
Right. And I would love to hear more from you about that kind of thing. Like, what would have been like a more welcoming training, or what will it look like in the future, hopefully, when
Yeah.
we do have those more welcoming trainings for people of color? Like, what's missing from your perspective there? And then I'd love to talk to you more about other parts of adoption that have been different from you for you.
Sure. So certainly, I mean, it's funny because the irony was that the social workers who were running our course were African American, and they kind of apologized for the content, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm an educator. I don't apologize for content. I fix it. I don't understand why this dumpster fire of a chapter in this narrative has not been changed to be more inclusive, and that it's more than oh, where do you go get your hair braided, and can I use VO5 on this Black child's hair, and buying the book Crowns. Like, I mean, this is really superficial junk, and I think that there is a real need, particularly for parents that are interested in transracial adoption, wherein the child is the person of color. They need some more intensive reality checks on the front end, that they understand how white supremacy moves and works in the world, and in adoption, that children of color are disproportionately in the foster care and in the adoption chute, and they are less desirable for any number of reasons, right? And they need to understand these things are real and will have an impact on their lives, and they need to be making decisions on the front end in terms of what's best for the child. And love is not enough. That's also a lie in adoption. Love is not enough. You need to be able to make connections, find resources, and really do your own personal work, but also the work that is necessary to raise children who may have experienced, really extreme trauma, and that includes infants, right? That includes infants, and so I would like to see training that really gets into that more, and I don't think that should be limited to parents who identify as white and are adopting. I think those are conversations that all of us in adoption need to be having, and I need to see more adoptive parents being really good advocates for their children and their children of color in particular, and I think that needs to be overtly addressed in training, and really kind of people need to be really prepared for the realities, because so many parents are adopting these kids, and I don't suggest that they don't love them. I know they love them, but they are taking them to white spaces which are psychologically dangerous, and sometimes physically dangerous, for those kids who don't have racial mirrors, who don't have a connection to culture, who don't, and then, later in life, they're kind of struggling to figure out, where do they fit? Who do they connect with? What is their identity? Because you can be raised by anyone and you can be deeply loved, but you are still going to be walking through the world in this particular body. And that's the reality. And I think that a lot of adoptive parents discount that experience.
Right. So that whole culture of how everyone else is viewing you, if you have friends and you have family, that's very nice.
Yeah.
But who you are to the world, that's something you have to learn about, educate yourself about. Right.
Yeah. And there's just needs to be a lot more training and resources around that for all parents, because I do think that we are more likely as APs to have experiences that how do I put this, that are challenging just because of the kids' trauma experiences, and how do we help them navigate those spaces, those experiences.
Finally, ABM was able to welcome her daughter into her home. Her friends really came through for her with support that often had nothing to do with supplies or advice.
So what was some of the more helpful things that people did for you? What did you like really appreciate when your 12-year-old entered your home?
Yeah. So two of my girlfriends hosted a small shower for me, because again, I didn't have the experience of a baby shower. I never ended up having that experience, and I had sworn off going to baby showers for a while because they had gotten kind of painful. And so to have that experience was lovely. It was lovely, and they nailed it because they gave me a lot. The folks that came and participated gave me a lot of gift cards, like movies and groceries and Walmart and Target. And, there were some spa cards in there too, which were really
perfect.
Great. That was wonderful. And folks that just said, I don't know what you need. I don't know what will be helpful, but I'm here to listen without judgment. Those friends, they came in clutch a lot of times because sometimes, I didn't have a partner then, and it got pretty lonely. And if anybody ever is, the single parent, like there were just times when I was really paranoid, where I was like, because Hope was so afraid and so timid, and just, she bounced around for a number of years, and now this is supposed to be permanent. She had moved across the country, all of these kinds of things. And there were times when I was just like, I am so miserable, and I am in my bathtub in a stool with the shower curtain drawn, the door was closed, the door to my room was closed, and I'm still whispering on the phone about like how hard this is and crying. And I swore that she could hear me, because she was so hyper vigilant about everything. And so I'm like, I can't even get a good cry because I'm afraid that she's going to hear it, and I don't want her to hear me cry because I don't want her to think that I don't want to do this, and when I really do. And so, those friends who listened to me whispering incoherently with cake shoving in my face, like in my bathroom, in my bathtub on a stool, are, those are that in those moments, that was the support I absolutely needed. And sometimes it took my family was always supportive, but it took a longer period of time, I think, for them to get to that place where they understood how challenging it was trying to set up, just be a full-time case manager, a mom, and I was finishing my dissertation. Like I was, perpetually at my wit's end.
Yeah. Is sleeping at all? Like, did you manage that?
No, I wasn't sleeping much. And I wasn't sleeping much, and I made a cake every week when the social worker came by, and she was like, "So you're making a cake every week?" And and Hope is
wow.
My daughter is not, she likes candy. She doesn't do baked goods as much as candy. And so the cake was mine because everything else in the house had become hers. And the cake was mine. So I baked a cake every week.
Right. Well, that's great for you to look out for yourself that way. Know what you need, right?
My waistline did not appreciate it, but I have no regrets.
Yeah. Good, great. So definitely you would recommend for others to listen and keep the advice to yourself.
Yes, keep the unsolicited advice to yourself. Kids are not dogs to be trained. Going younger doesn't mean that there's less trauma. What I did learn and what I've appreciated over the years, especially that for those first 2 years that were so challenging, was a lot of the experiences that I thought I would have as a mom, putting my daughter to bed, tucking her in, reading stories. I didn't think that I would have those experiences with a 12-year-old. And yet there was about a year where she had regressed so much, where that's what she needed. And I was like, whoa, how tricked out is this that she needs this, and this is an experience that I never thought I would have. And it ended up being a very beautiful time for
Oh,
us
wonderful.
that I cherish because it was so unexpected. And I ended up not sharing that with a lot of people outside of the blog, but like with my family, but just because they were just like, why are you reading to a 12-year-old? I mean, that sounds cool and everything, but like Mother Goose nursery rhymes? And I'm like old school nursery rhymes, like, yeah. And it was just such, I hated that she needed it because it was indicative of so much that she had missed. And yet both of us managed to get this experience that is kind of one of those core experiences that parents expect to get. And it was a really challenging to sit with the reality of why she needed it, but unbelievably beautiful and a blessing that we both got what we emotionally needed out of that experience as well. And so, just know that even though our kids are big and awkward and surly teenagers, sometimes what's going on behind the scenes is so we're really trying to meet their needs, which are not big surly teenagers, but like the 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 5-year-old that emotionally they really are.
Right. And I guess that is one thing that's pretty common in adoption is you kind of do have to throw out some of the rule book and do what's needed in the moment.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's
everything
common.
everything. I mean, I had wonderful parents. I have wonderful parents, and but the way that they raised me and my sisters is not a fit for the way I needed to raise them. It's just not a fit.
Along the way, ABM has learned a number of things that she would recommend to others who might be starting to parent an adopted child on their own.
So what were some really key things that you've learned along the way as, a single mom, busy, educated mom?
Spreadsheets and calendars are your friend, because so much of it is just paperwork and case management, finding, providers that meet her needs, take your insurance, like all that calculus that is all the time, figuring out where to invest in. I think that figuring out where to invest in, those things that aren't covered by insurance. But actually, let me back up. So, because I've written a few kind of posts along the way for newbies. If you don't have a therapist, get one. Get one. And don't act like you don't need one. Everybody's got trash in the background. You go get a therapist, because you're going to need someone safe to talk to. And that thing needs to be on the books weekly. Don't stun at me. I'm telling you this from experience. I still do therapy. I'm a big fan of therapy. And so she had her therapist, we have our therapist, and then I had my therapist. And but my own therapy is really important. Get a therapist. Before placement, get those antidepressants on deck. I'm totally serious.
Okay.
Get those antidepressants on deck for 2 reasons. 1, it can be challenging. 2, there's also, I also experienced post-adoption depression. And no one talks about it. No one tells you about it.
Right.
I was like, what the F is this? Why?
It's a thing.
it's a thing, and it's really, really, really challenging. And so get those better living through chemistry drugs on board. If that's not your thing, you better be ODing on St. John's wort or whatever, ashwanga, whatever it is that you need to do.
Right.
You need to have it on board beforehand, because like having to wait for a month for it to like, you know, get into the bloodstream and catch up and no, you don't have time for that. It is a crisis 24/7. So figuring out self-care, figuring out one of the things that I invested in pretty early was a sitter service, and that helped me identify sitters and nannies, because even though she was older, I couldn't leave her alone, and my job traveled a lot, and there was probably about a 6 to 9 month window where I had someone come in for 3 hours once a week, just so I could go get takeout and sit in my car and cry, or go have dinner with a friend, or sit in the park and read, or just a little bit of respite, to step away, clear my head, and be ready to go back. So look into those services and get them. The great thing about those is that there are a lot of college students and graduate students, and I was always able to find someone who was doing a master's program in special ed, a master's program in working on trauma or psychology. There were, we had a couple of nannies that were in doing their MSW social work degrees. And I was like, perfect, you know what you're getting, I know what I'm getting, you are learning these skills, hey, we're a match. And you know, and hope, really, like, we are still very, very close to some of the nannies that worked with us, especially the last one that worked with us for the several years of high school. And she's family, and she's a social worker, and it was a really great experience. So have that person, you know, look into those services so that you have respite.
So you continued that all the way through high school to have someone come and...
Yeah, I did, because I didn't want her to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
I also did not trust her to take care of the dog adequately. I still fret about that. Even though she does perfectly well. It is wholly trustworthy at this point, but I didn't want her to be alone. And the nannies provided, they not only provided that supervision, but they also provided a level of engagement. They were fun, they were young, but they also were skilled.
Right. So that's definitely something you've got to think about when you're heading into this on your own, is that backup and support.
Yeah. Yeah. And
not going to come naturally.
Yeah. Having her, you know, out and about, I mean, I already, you know, like even if you think that there's no possible way that your kid will do X, because when could they possibly do it? They find time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how time really works now that I'm a parent, because it's a mystery, but trust and believe that there are several magical hours that are just not anywhere on a calendar or a clock, and your kid will find them and figure out how to do something stupid. Like, that's for adopted kids, that's for biological kids, that's for your cousins, your nieces, your nephews. They will find time to do some things.
Right. And hopefully you find out about that thing.
Yes.
Before anything. Really
right. So supervision, you know, I was not about to leave her alone in the high school. And again, because she was emotionally much younger than her chronological age, it also made sense to make sure that, you know, someone was here and that she felt safe and good. And, you know, I still, she'll be 21 in a few weeks, and I still kind of fret sometimes. I'm about to start traveling again, you know, in this new COVID world, and for work. And I'm not gonna lie, I have a little bit of anxiety. Not that she's gonna do anything really, you know, bad or anything, but it's just like, all right, we're getting ready to do this again, and I have to kind of get comfortable with it again.
ABM started a blog to inform her friends and family about the adoption process she was going through, as many people do. In her case, she began to realize that she could be the voice of the adoptive Black mom that she missed hearing, and her growing audience seemed to indicate that her voice was filling a void.
I'd love to hear a little more about, so you've chosen to put yourself out there as a Black adoptive mom, and I'd love to know more about how that happened. Like, what did you hope to get out of it, and what have you gotten out of it?
So originally I really only intended to do the blog through the process, and it was really more about keeping my family and friends up to date on the process, because everybody says it's a very long, drawn out process, and it's just blah, 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 blah. And of course, then like my process ended up being relatively short by most standards. And but by that time, in the I guess 6 months or so, it was that I had started writing, and by the time she had been placed with me, I had gained a lot more followers, and then I was like, well, do I want to continue or don't I? And then again, I was always looking to read about other people's experiences, and there just weren't that many experiences of single moms that I could find, and there were just no, or one or two, writers talking about the experience of being a mother of color, adoptive mom of color, and being Black specifically. And so I, as we say, and Black culture, I did it for the culture. Like, I mean, I felt like there needed to be a voice. There needed to continue to be a voice about that. And the more I wrote about my own journey as a mom, because I tell people, I'm like, yes, the blog is about adoption. It's really about how I'm reacting to these things. It's Hope is a character in my blog, but and it is about the two of us, but I really try to frame it as this is kind of my thoughts and how I'm working through some stuff. And then I found that there were times where I was really glad I had the blog, because I could talk about related issues from this particular lens, which is a voice that's just not typically out there. So, when I started joining adoption, forums and stuff online, and there would be so few people of color, or the people of color the numbers might be more equitable, but there was constant invalidation of our lived experience, both as parents, but also for adoptees. And I was like, I owe it to, I owe it to the culture, but I also owe it to my daughter to continue talking about these things, because someone needs to advocate for her on a larger scale. It's not just, day to day, but for kids like her, and what our lived experience is like. And that kind of kept me writing. And so thinking, by day, I'm a researcher, but I work on diversity issues. And so it really meant that I was taking the type of work that I do by day and applying it directly to the adoption space, and really kind of doing that and talking about how adoption spaces are largely constructed white spaces, and that there's really very little space or time or voice for non-white, standardized, whatever that, archetype is. And so that kept me writing. And then I also started connecting with both other parents of color, but also adoptees of color, who were like, whoa, there's somebody talking about this particular aspect of the triad, and what is that like?
ABM is still watching her daughter grow and reach new milestones in adulthood. So far, she's continuing to be a voice for Black adoptive moms everywhere. If you want to find more about what Black adoptive families face or listen to other episodes, feel free to check out my website, www.adoptionuncovered.com. And thank you.